Thank you, Pranesh. Thank you for speaking to the Helka. Well, we're discussing about the recent snoop by US in the cyberspace of India. Our first question to put you would be: India is planning to seek details from US on reports that it is the fifth most tracked country by American intelligence agencies. What effects can it have on India?
So what we know is that it's the fifth most tracked uh, by one particular under some particular programs. We don't know whether it's the fifth most tracked under that program, which specifically targets foreign countries, which is the FISA related programs. Okay, and so India might actually be higher than that, might be lower than that. We don't really know. And the second part of your question was, what effects can that have? So I think it has an effect of decreasing India's national security. It has the effect of eroding Indian citizens' privacy, because though we don't really know whether those are Indian citizens who are being monitored, we know that there were uh, calls and ISP data from India, but presumably the largest amount of that was of Indian citizens. So it actually it erodes our privacy.
So, can we say that the data relating to the private communication of Indian citizens may have been harvested? So, if so, can India hold the American agencies accountable?
Current laws don't really allow us to hold the American agencies accountable, not directly at least. So, what we need to do as a government is to support an investigation through the Human Rights Council and ask for the United Nations Human Rights Council to actually prepare, investigate this issue to find out whether it was in conformance with international human rights obligations that the United States has. Because even if this was legal under American law, and we aren't right now clear whether it was legal under American law, the part that relates to foreigners affects not just American law, but affects its international obligations under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, etc. So that must be investigated by the Human Rights Council. So already a large group of international civil society organizations have delivered a statement at the Human Rights Council. The Center for Internet and Society was one of the signatories to that statement, and I hope that the Indian government and other governments around the world also follow up on this.
Well, there's a huge debate going on international forum about the same thing. So, US has been secretly gathering information from internet companies, including Google, Facebook, and Twitter. And Guardian reported some 6.5 billion reports since 2007 has been gathered from India only. And according to your article, which you mentioned in ED, Economic Time was 12.61 billion pieces of metadata from India. So can India ask for those reports, since US has defended the right to snoop, saying many factors, many terror attacks have been thwarted because of this?
What the U.S. government has defended is it has defended the programs under against the accusation that they overreached under American law. So they basically said that no, we aren't snooping on domestic citizens, that this is targeted at foreigners. So that doesn't comfort me any, because I and lots of people that I know and lots of citizens outside of the US are being denied the right to be human, the right to have fundamental rights such as that of privacy and freedom of speech, and that is a big problem.
I'm just going to quote Barack Obama's statement on the same issue, that him saying that it's modest encroachment on privacy that was necessary to defend the United States. You cannot have 100% security with 100% privacy. Some sacrifices have to be made. Now what matters is this sacrifice made on the part of America or on part of India. Because since we're talking about, it's not only India which is involved in this whole thing. It's like it comes on the fifth, Afghanistan and Pakistan. So does it mean that they are catering India in the same as they look at Pakistan and as they look at Afghanistan? What do you have to say about it?
Well, for me, Afghani citizens and Pakistani citizens should also be outraged at this. And we must realize that no one's talking about 100% privacy. There is no such thing as 100% privacy. So that's a false dichotomy to set up between 100% privacy and 100% security in the first place. What I do believe quite strongly is that mass surveillance and dragnet surveillance is not useful and is not justified in any kind of fight against terrorism or anything else. That what we need is actually targeted surveillance, okay, minimized surveillance. You have surveillance requests for those people you suspect, okay, not on all telephone calls going on in the US and through Verizon, etc. They asked for 3 months of all data, whether it was involving American citizens or not. Now, in India, we have a similar situation. In India, for instance, all telecom operators under their license are required to provide a special room on their premises for law enforcement agencies. Now, that room is supposed to have unfiltered access to all the data passing through every telecom company, and this also applies to all ISPs. Now, that is not democratic, in my opinion.
Since so much of data has been collected, like according to you, 12.1 billion of metadata, and according to the Guardian report, it's 6.5. But that's a hell lot of data. That's huge. So can an average Indian ask the government to take up the case with US, or for our own security on our own level, can we initiate like firewall on our Facebook, Twitter, or other accounts to maintain security? Is that possible?
Okay, just one clarification. The figures that I cited are from that Guardian report, and so I don't have any independent access to NSA or anything else. So that apart, I think this is a very good question. We should ask the government of India to take it up with the American government, and as I said earlier, with the Human Rights Council as well. So that's what we as Indian citizens can do against the US. But there are two other kinds of things that we as Indian citizens must do. One, we should act against the Googles and the Facebooks and the BSNLs and Airtels of the world. And that we should do by not allowing them to get any data that they can pass on to the government and violate our privacy. What we should do is that we should have all communications encrypted end to end. That will mean that even these companies, okay, Google and Facebook, etc., won't know what we are communicating. Okay, so on their servers, it'll be in an encrypted fashion. Okay,
and how is that going to be possible?
By using the free software that makes it possible, by using encryption technologies. There is the possibility of having encrypted, end-to-end encryption. But the problem with end-to-end encryption is, of course, that both sides of the communications need to be using it. That it can't just be you who uses end-to-end encryption. It's end-to-end, so only one end can't be using encryption alone. Both sides need to use it. A few years ago, some researchers, I think in Norway, who were sniffing traffic at a Tor exit node, actually found the password for India's embassy in Beijing, okay, and the ambassador's password at that, okay, and they published it, and it's bad enough that they weren't using encryption, the Indian government wasn't using encryption, and that this was made public. But the worst part, to add salt to the proverbial injury, was that even a week after this was made public, the government still hadn't changed the password. Okay, reporters from Indian Express were still able to actually gain access to that mailbox. Okay, so we know that Indian government security is pathetically bad. Okay, and we also know that NTRO has been snooping on other Indian government officials. Okay, NTRO's India's equivalent of the NSA, by the way, and has been snooping on Indian government officials. And the Department of Electronics and IT recently complained about it to the Home Secretary, and that because it had been doing so without any permission and had been hacking into our own government servers rather than hacking other government servers.
Well, but the American Civil Liberties Union suing Obama administration over NSA surveillance program. Can an Indian NGO sue Indian government too for the same reasons of sharing the information?
It's not as though that hasn't happened before. In 1996, the People's Union for Civil Liberties actually sued the Indian government. Okay, they took the Indian government to court, and the Supreme Court agreed with the PUCL on to a large extent, and said that any kind of surveillance that's happening in India without following the guidelines that the Supreme Court laid down in that case would be illegal. Okay, so now we follow the guidelines that the Supreme Court of India laid down, but that's only on paper books. We know that the NTRO, we know that even people in government don't believe the NTRO is following these guidelines. We know that. For instance, the Telegraph Act only allows for surveillance in case of public emergency or danger to public safety. Yet, first, Neela Rabia's phones are tapped. Okay, first we are told that she's being investigated for economic fraud, for tax evasion. Okay, and then the government realizes that actually there's a Supreme Court case that says that tax evasion can't be a reason for wiretapping.
Yeah.
Okay? And then the story changes to Neera Rabia being a Pakistani spy.
So, what should concern India if the US government refuses to acknowledge non-Americans who also have fundamental rights to privacy as they consider the right to privacy of the Americans? If not under the US law or the international laws like Universal Declaration of Human Rights and ICCPR, what are your views on it? Like how can one progress on it?
I said earlier itself that I believe that the Indian government should take this up with the UN Human Rights Council, okay, and should ask for a report to be for a special report by the special rapporteur on freedom of speech, for instance, on this particular instance. Okay, just recently, around a couple of weeks ago or so, the UN Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, Frank LaRue, he submitted a report to the Human Rights Council on surveillance and the threats that it places on freedom of speech. Okay, and actually there should be a follow-up report based on the new revelations made in the Guardian expose. So and the important thing to note in this is that it's not the US alone that is doing this. The Indian government is also doing this. Okay, that the kind of mass surveillance that America is practicing is being practiced in many other countries, including India, and sometimes with even less legal oversight and accountability than in the US. In the US, at least, the NSA is accountable to their Senate. In India, NTRO is not accountable to Parliament because it has not been created under an act of Parliament. In India, for instance, these kinds of metadata are being provided under a telecom license, under an ISP license, not under a court order. In the US, at least, it's being provided under a court order. Okay, so there are sure, what's being revealed in the US is really bad, and we must fight against it. But that shouldn't mean that somehow we say that in India things are hunky-dory and that we don't need to reform the law in India at all. In India, in fact, we don't have any kind of privacy legislation. Again, that I think is a must. It should be introduced immediately. It's been on the anvil for a long while. We from the Center for Internet and Society have proposed a citizens draft of a privacy bill, and I would urge the government to take a look at that and to curtail mass surveillance as it's currently happening, and focus more on targeted surveillance as and when necessary, and only in those cases in which it's passed a number of tests.
Let's talk about the companies. No Indian web company has ever challenged the government in India over a privacy-related matter. Indian law seems, it seems that it's far more worse than American law on these matters. We could say.
If someone with, say, with the Intelligence Bureau or RNDW, if they, spill some secrets, okay, they can go to jail for up to 2 years, okay, under 1985 law. However, if someone from an ISP, okay, does not immediately provide all access that the government is asking of it, okay, says for instance that the government's request is not legal, okay, they can go to jail up to 7 years, okay, under the Information Technology Act. Okay, these kinds of laws, okay, prevent companies from actually challenging the government. The only company that has challenged the government on something like this is Yahoo India. It's a foreign company. Okay, they've gotten requests from a body called the CCA. Okay, and whereas the IT Act doesn't allow the CCA to make these kinds of requests, and they've actually gone to court about it. Now, I'm pretty sure that the CCA wasn't asking only Yahoo, that it was asking other companies as well. Okay, yet those other companies, I don't hear of them having gone to court. Okay, they seem to have complied with these kinds of requests. Okay, so for me, that is also a problem. That while some in Indian industry want these foreign companies to relocate their servers into India to prevent American access, that for me doesn't quite address the issues, because under American law, even if the servers aren't physically located in the US, because these are American companies, okay, American government and the NSA still has access to them, okay, and access to these files, okay, and metadata, etc. And B, all that we're doing by having them physically located in India is ensuring that the Indian surveillance, is also present. What we should instead do is ensure that Indian laws on privacy and free speech also apply to these companies, that they actually not surrender Indian citizens' privacy just because American law requires them to.